Do you have a solid cap like this on your fuel cell, but you need to add a tether? Well, today we're going to show you a really easy trick to be able to add one for relatively cheap. Okay, so in our last video we showed you how to add this screw-on style cap. The issue is, well, there's no tether, so you could theoretically lose this very, very easily, if it gets forgotten, and they're not cheap. So we need to add a tether to it. We're going to show you a method that we like to use for actually mounting to this cap. Now, we're going to show you how to build a tether for cheap also. You could go ahead and buy a cable tether. That's not really the important part of this. So we are going to show you something that's relatively inexpensive, but the method for attaching it to the cap will be the one to watch. All right, let's get started. The list of tools and materials you're going to need for this is pretty simple, actually. You're going to need the cap itself, then you're going to need a chunk of 10 gauge wire, eyelets that will fit a 1/4 inch bolt, or whatever size bolt you decide to go with. We're going with 1/4 inch. This was just to show, these are the yellow ones. We have some that don't have the yellow on them, but be able to fit a 1/4 inch hole. Then you're going to need, you're going to need some strippers and crimpers for those. We have some heat shrink to put on afterwards. And then you're going to need a drill bit and tap to be able to drill and tap 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch nut and bolts. Okay, so the first step is we need to drill and tap one of these wings for a 1/4 inch bolt. Now, something to note, I've taken the O-ring off the bottom side to make sure we don't nick it. The other thing that I've done off camera is I've measured and marked our center line here. The idea is that we want just far enough away from this curved edge to be able to drill and then tap our bolt. That keeps us far enough away from the O-ring and the threads on the bottom. Even though we're not really going to poke out the bottom, it does leave enough room for error. So now we just need to drill and tap this here. Anytime that I'm drilling, especially this aluminum stuff like that, I like to start with a smaller drill bit to make sure I get a good center. Okay, now that we have the hole drilled and tapped here, we're going to go ahead and remove this. Now, I put that towel there so that we didn't mar the finish. And I'd like to show, let me grab the O-ring here, that with the O-ring on, you can see how far away we are. Now again, we took that off for insurance, but we are considerably far away from the edge there. The next step is determining the length of your tether. The hole in the cap is going to have to spin the length of it. So if you want to go from here down to your cap, you don't want this distance, you want this distance. Otherwise, you can't possibly spin it, it'll just stop part of the way. Now what I suggest doing is going from one of these corners. Because if you can reach this corner, you can go from anywhere you need on the cell. So if later you end up needing to move your tether for whatever reason, you can do so without worrying if you have the extra length or having to make it again. Easiest way I found to do it is we're going to just come down from this hole down here, take the end of our wire, basically right at the hole, come up here to the edge of the cap, and then I'm going to add, well, about 1 inch. It's always better to have it just a little bit long than it is to have it a little bit short. Cut our wire. Now I know once I put the end on there and the end on there, no matter how it spins around, it will fit. So now we're going to go ahead and make our tether. This next part's fairly easy. We're simply going to strip the ends, crimp on our ring terminals, and add a little bit of heat shrink. Now the reason that we're using these two different sizes is because this is what we have laying around. Trying to make this one on the cheap, it has us using these leftover materials. If this was something that I was trying to do perfectly, I would go ahead and get a proper length of heat shrink. But again, this is just what we had laying around the garage. Now it doesn't matter if you have the insulation exactly perfect here, top and bottom. We're not running any electricity through here. Okay, now we're going to go ahead, push our heat shrink up. We're going to go ahead, shrink the heat shrink all on this, and then we'll be ready for the next step. Now, I should point out that even though we used heat shrink, we could have easily left this bare wire. If you have some sort of braided sleeving or anything like that you want to put on, we did it mainly for aesthetics. So it doesn't really matter if or what you cover this with. For the first step, we're going to take our 1/4 inch bolt. We're going to thread it right through our tether. Next, we're going to take a lock nut and we're going to put it on backwards. As you can see, the lock portion, let's get the camera to focus here. Focus. There we go. As you can see, tether, bolt, lock nut backwards. The easy way to get this to actually thread on like this, start that nut the proper way first, let it cut a couple threads in, and then reverse it. Okay, now if the camera will focus again here, as you can see, we have some play. That allows movement here. Okay, now we're going to go ahead, take a little dab of Loctite. That's probably excessive. And we're going to thread this whole assembly here into our cap. Now, as you can see, we're not poking out of the bottom. We are, let's see if we can focus. We are in that hole a little bit, so we can go ahead and tighten that gap up just a little bit more. Now, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to tighten the nut against the cap. Now by doing that, we have effectively locked this whole unit in, and our tether is free to move. It does stick up a little bit, but as you can tell, it really isn't going to affect being able to grab it to loosen it. There are slimmer methods, but this is a really cheap, easy way. So now, let's go ahead and show it on the can. Once you have your tether on your cap, it's pretty easy. One side of your eyelet is flat, one side is not. Try to put the flat side down so that way it's not bending it funny, but just for the sake of this, because obviously this isn't in the car, this corner is as far away as any of the others. So taking our cap, These things seal good, but sometimes they can be a pain in the butt to screw on. There we go. And there you have it. Now, this is not the most elegant solution. It's cheap. Realistically, most racers could make this with scraps they have laying around. It's a piece of wire, a couple eyelets, and drill and tap a hole. But not everyone thinks about that. I personally have lost a cap at the track, not one of these thankfully, but one of the other style, because I hadn't had it tethered. So I do have to give a major shout out to John Culp down at Union City Speed Shop. If you guys need one of these fancy caps, look him up. But this was actually his idea. He's the one that told it to me. I'm sure he's not the first person that thought of it, but it was his idea. I'd seen him do it on another car with this style cap. So here we are. Yeah, that's it. I don't know what else to say. So join us live here at Front Wheel Discussion every Thursday on Facebook at 7 p.m. We do a live show where we interview drivers, talk about news, give out some tech tips. And I sincerely thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.